My name is Olivia Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and I spent the last 5 years building a tech company in complete silence. I didn't post about it online, I didn't talk about it at family dinners, I didn't even tell my best friends all the details. Why? Because no one believed in it, especially not my family. Tonight, that silence finally paid off. We were at my brother Jason's engagement dinner. His fiancée, Rachel, works at a big healthcare company. We were halfway through dessert when she suddenly looked at me, eyes wide. Wait, you're the founder of Next Tech? The room went silent. My parents' faces froze, Jason's jaw dropped. It was the moment I had waited for my whole life. But let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Highland Park, a fancy suburb just north of Chicago. The streets were clean, the lawns were perfect, and the people were competitive. My dad, Richard Mitchell, wasn't just any surgeon. He was the surgeon, the one other doctors called when things got difficult. My mom, Diana, was a top corporate lawyer. She never lost a case. Never. And then there was my older brother, Jason. 4 years older than me, he was the golden child, straight A student, science fair champion, and future doctor. He followed in dad's footsteps perfectly. Our house was big and beautiful, but it never felt warm. Every dinner felt like a business meeting. Mom would ask, "So, what did everyone accomplish today?" Jason always had something impressive. I got 100% on my advanced physics test, or I started volunteering at the hospital downtown. Then it was my turn. Once when I was 15, I said, "I built a website for fun this weekend." Mom smiled, but it was that cold kind of smile. "That's nice, honey, but shouldn't you be focusing on debate team? Colleges like real commitments." Dad nodded, already turning to ask Jason about his latest biology project. I got the message, loud and clear. In their eyes, computers were just toys. Success meant law school or med school, not coding, so I stopped sharing. I made my bedroom my private world. My walls weren't covered in awards like Jason's. They had sketches of app designs and pages of printed code. I stayed up late learning HTML, Python, and JavaScript. No one noticed, unless my grades started to slip. When I was 16, I made a program to help my school organize its huge annual fundraiser. The teacher in charge, Mrs. Winters, was shocked. "This is amazing. It cut our planning time in half," she told my parents. "Mom just said Olivia has many interests, but we're focusing on law school." Law school? I wasn't even planning to apply. Still, I kept going. Then came the big moment, the regional high school coding competition. I had spent months working on an inventory system for small businesses. I was so proud. But the finals were scheduled for the same Saturday as Jason's party. He had just gotten into medical school. "We're so sorry, sweetie," Mom said, "but your brother worked his whole life for this. You understand, right?" I competed alone. Every other student had someone cheering them on. I had a backpack and a quiet seat at the back, and I won. First place. Real software engineers were the judges. One of them shook my hand and said, "You've got something special. Don't let go of this." I walked into our house holding that trophy. Inside, everyone was toasting Jason. "That's wonderful, dear," Dad said, barely looking up. That night, I made a decision. I was going to build something great, something they couldn't ignore, and I'd do it with or without them. During senior year, it was time to apply for college. My parents pushed hard for Ivy League schools, Yale, Harvard, Columbia. "Focus on pre-law," Mom said. "You'd be an amazing lawyer," but I didn't want that life. I applied to Illinois Tech. They had one of the best computer science programs in the state, and they offered me a big scholarship. When I told my parents, their faces fell. "You're throwing away your potential," Dad said. "Computer science?" Mom asked. "You could do so much more." What they meant was, I wasn't doing what they wanted. I wasn't being the Mitchell they had imagined. Jason, back from his first year at med school, tried to help. "Maybe it's just a phase," he said. "She'll figure it out." I packed my bags and left that fall, feeling scared but also free. For the first time, I could just be me. College changed everything. At Illinois Tech, I wasn't the quiet girl from Highland Park. I was Olivia. The coder professors asked to stay after class to explain her ideas. I made friends who shared my passion. I found people who respected what I was good at. During my sophomore year, I met Emma Rodriguez. She sat next to me in advanced programming, and we clicked right away. While others struggled, we finished our final project early and added bonus features, just for fun. We started having long talks over coffee. One night, Emma showed me an article. It was about how poor communication in hospitals often leads to wrong diagnoses and medical mistakes. "My mom has lupus," she said. "It took years and 3 wrong doctors to figure it out. They didn't talk to each other." That got us thinking, what if we could build a system that helped doctors and patients share medical info better? We started sketching ideas on napkins and whiteboards. That was the beginning of what would one day become Next Tech. But at home, nothing changed.
During summer breaks, we had family dinners. Jason talked about residency. Everyone clapped. Then they turned to me. So, still doing that computer thing. I just smiled and gave vague answers. I knew what I was building, and I knew one day they'd find out. At college, I felt alive. I was finally doing what I loved without being judged. Every day I woke up excited to learn more, to code more, to build something that mattered. Emma and I worked on our idea every free moment we had. We didn't just want to make another health app. We wanted to fix a broken system. We wanted to give patients and doctors better tools to share and understand medical information. We named our project NextTech. It started as a simple app, just a prototype. But every week we improved it. We added secure messaging. We designed a dashboard for doctors to track patients more easily. We created alerts to catch problems early, like missed medications or confusing instructions. By our junior year, NextTech was working well enough to help in real clinics. We partnered with a small community health center in Chicago. They let us test our app with a few doctors and patients. The results were incredible. Missed appointments dropped. Patients said they finally understood their treatment plans. Doctors saved time and made fewer errors. It was working, but I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. When I came home for winter break that year, the first thing my mom asked was, "Are you thinking about internships at law firms?" "I'm actually working on something else," I said, trying to keep it simple. Dad frowned. "You mean that tech hobby?" "It's not a hobby," I said quietly. "It's a company. We just launched a pilot test with a clinic." "That's nice, honey," Mom said, cutting me off. "But you should focus on something stable, something respectable." Then she turned to Jason and asked about his surgical rotation. I sat at the dinner table, pushing food around my plate, wondering why my parents couldn't hear me. I wasn't failing. I was flying. But to them, it didn't count unless it fit their idea of success. So I stopped explaining. I started building in silence. Back at school, Emma and I kept pushing. We entered business plan competitions. We pitched to investors. We met mentors who helped us understand funding, growth, and how to protect our intellectual property. It wasn't easy. Some nights we barely slept. We coded through weekends. We got rejections from people who said we were too young, or that 2 college girls couldn't handle healthcare tech. But we didn't stop. We won 3rd place in a national college startup contest. That brought us our first real funding, $50,000 from an angel investor who believed in our mission. With that money, we hired 2 more developers and built a stronger, more secure version of NextTech. We launched a beta version for the public 6 months later. We were 22. After graduation, Emma and I rented a small apartment near downtown Chicago. We didn't have much money, but we had a dream, and now we had proof it could work. We turned down job offers from big tech firms. Everyone said we were crazy. My parents were furious. "You're walking away from a stable future," Dad said. "You're making a mistake," Mom warned. "You're still young enough to apply to law school." I smiled politely and said, "Thanks, but I have work to do." Jason tried to support me in his own way. He said things like, "I admire your passion," but I could still hear the doubt in his voice. I didn't blame them. They just didn't get it. But I wasn't building NextTech to make them proud anymore. I was building it because I knew the world needed it. Year after year, we grew slowly but steadily. We started working with more clinics and small hospitals. We improved our features based on feedback. We stayed laser-focused on the goal, better communication between doctors and patients. NextTech started getting attention. We were featured in a tech magazine, then a healthcare blog, then a podcast. But I still didn't tell my parents. Why? Because I didn't want to hear their polite smiles and passive judgment again. I wanted them to see the full picture one day. All at once. No doubts. No room to brush it aside. So I waited. By the time I turned 30, NextTech had over 200,000 users. We had a team of 15 employees, and we were profitable. One of the country's biggest healthcare companies reached out. They wanted to license our technology. Talks turned into meetings. Meetings turned into contracts. A year later, they made an offer. They wanted to acquire NextTech for millions. Emma and I spent weeks with lawyers and advisors, making sure it was the right deal. In the end, we said yes. We had built something real, something big, something life-changing, and I still hadn't told my parents. Then a few months ago, I got an invitation. Jason was getting engaged. There would be a big dinner with family and friends. Of course I was invited. Part of me didn't want to go. What would I even say? I knew they still saw me as the little sister who's wasting her time on apps, but something told me to go, to show up quietly, not to brag, not to explain, just to be there. So I did. That night I wore a simple black dress. Nothing flashy. No announcements. I sat at the table like always, listening as my parents praised Jason for starting his surgical residency. Then someone asked Jason's fiancée what she did. "I work in tech," Rachel said. "My company just acquired a small startup with a really interesting medical platform." "Oh," my mom asked. "What's it called?" "NextTech," she said, smiling. "Honestly, the founder is a genius. She built a platform that solved one of our biggest communication problems overnight. I've never seen anything like it." She looked across the table at me. Her eyes widened. "Wait," she whispered. "You're the founder of NextTech?" The room went completely still. My father's fork paused in midair. My mother blinked. Jason stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. That single moment, those 5 seconds of stunned silence, was worth every quiet night, every rejected pitch, every family dinner where I was ignored. That was the moment I had waited for, and I didn't need to say a word. After Rachel recognized me at the engagement dinner, the room went quiet. I could feel every eye on me. Even the people who hadn't heard the full conversation were now watching, sensing something important had just happened. "You're the founder of Next Tech?" Rachel repeated. I smiled. "Yes, Emma and I started it in college." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Rachel grinned. "That's incredible. Everyone at my company has been talking about your work for months. You've completely changed how we handle patient care. Honestly, I had no idea I was marrying into your family." She laughed a little, trying to ease the tension. Jason blinked. "Wait, you're the Olivia Mitchell who built Next Tech? That's been in all those healthcare articles?" I nodded again. Jason leaned back in his chair, clearly trying to make sense of it. I didn't know. Why didn't you say anything?" "I tried," I said gently, "a few times. But nobody really listened." That hit harder than I meant it to. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, but the truth hung heavy in the air. My dad cleared his throat. "So, this app of yours, it's doing well?" Rachel jumped in before I could answer. "Doing well? Dr. Mitchell, her app just saved our company millions. It's already being rolled out across 4 new hospitals. And the acquisition? Huge. Honestly, your daughter is one of the most impressive people I've met in tech, and I've met a lot." I watched my father's expression shift. From confusion to realization. This wasn't just some side project anymore. This wasn't a cute hobby. This was real. For the rest of the evening, the energy was different. My parents asked more questions. My brother looked at me with a mix of surprise and something else. Maybe admiration. Maybe regret. Later that night, after most guests had left, Mom found me in the kitchen. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. I turned toward her, surprised. "I thought I was protecting you," she continued, "pushing you toward law school, toward something safe. But I wasn't listening. I didn't understand how serious you were, and how talented." I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her. She stepped closer. "I'm proud of you, Olivia. I really am, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. It wasn't everything I had wanted, but it was enough for now." Dad took longer to come around. The next morning, I found him reading an article on his iPad about the Next Tech acquisition. He looked up and said, "This is impressive." I nodded. "You always were good with computers," he added. "I guess I just didn't see the potential." "You didn't want to," I said softly. "It didn't fit your version of success." He sighed and set the tablet down. "You're right. I wanted you to have a clear path. Medicine, law, something I understood. But you've created something I never could have imagined." That, coming from him, meant more than I expected. Jason and I talked a few days later, over coffee. "I feel like I missed so much," he admitted. "I've always been so focused on following the plan, doing what Mom and Dad expected. I didn't even notice you were building something amazing." "I get it," I said. "You were always under pressure too." He shook his head. "Still, I should have been there for you. As your brother." I smiled. "Well, you've got time to make up for it." He laughed. "Deal." After that weekend, everything changed. Not just in how my family saw me, but in how I saw myself. For years, I had worked hard to prove something, to earn their respect, to be seen. But now, I realized, I didn't need their permission anymore. I had built something powerful. Not just a company, but a life on my own terms. And even if they had never come around, I would have still been proud. But now that they did, the weight I'd carried for years started to lift. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a major tech conference in San Francisco. My topic was Building in Silence, How Doubt Fueled Innovation. I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, investors, founders, students, and shared my story. How I'd taught myself to code at 15. How my family didn't understand my passion. How I'd built Next Tech in dorm rooms and coffee shops, while everyone else was chasing traditional careers. And how I stayed quiet, not because I was ashamed, but because I was focused. When I finished, the applause was loud and long. After the talk, dozens of young women came up to me, many with tears in their eyes. "You made me believe it's possible. I thought I was the only one whose family didn't support their dreams. Thank you for showing us that we can succeed without permission." That day, I realized something even bigger. I hadn't just built an app. I'd become a voice for others who felt invisible. Back in Chicago, life moved forward. Next Tech continued to grow under the new company's leadership. Emma and I stayed on as advisors, but we also began exploring new ideas. We started mentoring young tech founders, especially women from underrepresented backgrounds. We launched a small fund to invest in healthcare startups with real-world impact. I bought a quiet condo in the city. Not flashy, just peaceful. I filled it with books, plants, and sunlight. For the first time in a long time, I felt at home, and I started getting calls from my parents, from Jason, not to ask what I was doing wrong, but to ask how I was doing, and to really listen to the answer. One night, Mom called just to chat. No hidden agenda, no passive judgment. At the end of the call, she said, "You know, Olivia, you've always been different, but I see now that was your strength, not your weakness."
I sat on my balcony after that, looking out at the city lights. All those years I felt small, ignored, misunderstood. Now I saw everything differently. They hadn't changed who I was, but I had changed what they saw. And most importantly, I had changed what I believed about myself. A few months after the acquisition, I received a handwritten letter in the mail, not an email, not a LinkedIn message, an actual letter on heavy paper with neat handwriting. It was from a 17-year-old girl named Maya Patel, a high school senior from Indianapolis. She wrote, "Dear Olivia, I saw your talk at the tech conference on YouTube. I watch it every week. My parents want me to become a doctor like my older brother, but I want to study computer science and build apps that help people. I've never heard anyone tell a story like yours before. Thank you for showing me that I'm not crazy. Thank you for proving that quiet girls can still be powerful. Maya." I read the letter twice, then a third time, then I sat back in my chair and cried, not out of sadness, but from the deep truth of it. I saw myself in Maya. I saw the girl I used to be, the girl who stayed up late writing code in secret, the girl who felt invisible at her own dinner table. That night, I made a decision. Next Tech was just the beginning. Now it was time to give back. Emma was all in. I've been thinking the same thing she said when I called her. Let's help the girls who are like we were. Let's build them a bridge. So we started She Builds, a nonprofit program for teenage girls interested in technology and healthcare innovation. We launched small, just 20 students in our first summer cohort. They learned coding, product design, and business basics. We brought in guest speakers, doctors, engineers, startup founders, and created real world challenges for the students to solve. Maya was one of the first to apply. When she walked into the classroom on the first day, she looked nervous, but by the end of the week, she was leading her team with confidence. Watching her was like seeing my past and the future, all at once. One morning, I walked into her classroom early. Maya was already there, typing quickly, completely focused. I smiled and sat beside her. "What are you working on?" "It's a prototype for an app that helps non-English speaking patients understand their prescriptions," she said. "My grandmother almost took the wrong medicine last year because she didn't understand the label." My heart swelled. "That's brilliant." She looked up at me, then paused. "Do you ever miss the old days before the company sold?" I thought about it. The nights when Emma and I ate ramen at 2 a.m. while debugging code. The thrill of seeing our user base grow by thousands overnight. The quiet pride of building something the world hadn't seen before. Sometimes, I admitted, but I think this, watching people like you build the future, might be even better. As She Builds grew, so did our influence. We started getting requests from schools across the country: Chicago, Houston, Oakland, Miami. Even some international schools wanted to bring our program to their students. Suddenly, we weren't just teaching coding, we were creating a movement, one that told young girls, "You are not too quiet, you are not too different, you are not dreaming too big." But growth came with challenges. One afternoon, we got a call from a major investor. She wanted to donate a large sum, 7 figures, to expand She Builds nationwide. Emma and I were thrilled, until we read the fine print. The investor wanted us to change our curriculum, remove certain parts of the program, focus more on traditional job prep than innovation, cut back on the real-world projects, and shift toward career-safe tracks. In short, turn She Builds into a prep course, not a creative space. Emma looked at me after we got off the phone. "If we accept her money, we lose our vision." I nodded. "If we say no, we slow down growth." We sat with that for a while. It felt like deja vu. Once again, I was standing between what was safe and what was true, just like when I was 17. Just like when I walked away from law school plans to build Next Tech. And just like back then, I knew the answer. "We say no," I said. Emma smiled. "Good, I already drafted the email." We sent a polite but firm reply that evening, and we slept peacefully. A week later, we received a different kind of email. This time, from a group of women founders who had seen our work. They offered to fund our next 3 years, no strings attached. "You've inspired us," one of them wrote. "Now let us help you inspire others." Sometimes, the right people show up when you're brave enough to stay true to your values. That fall, I was invited back to my high school to speak, the same school where I'd once built websites in secret, where I'd skipped my own tech competition to attend my brother's party. Walking through those hallways again, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the girl hiding in the computer lab anymore. I was the founder of Next Tech, the co-leader of She Builds, the woman who had built her life brick by brick, line by line, without needing anyone's permission. In the auditorium, I stood on stage in front of 100 students. I told them my story, just like I'm telling you now. At the end, I said, "You don't have to wait to be seen. You don't have to shrink to fit someone else's idea of success. The path you build yourself may be hard, but it will also be yours. And that makes all the difference." They clapped, and I saw a girl in the front row, clutching a notebook and blinking fast like she was trying not to cry. I'd been her, and now I was showing her the way forward.
To be continued in part 5, The Full Circle. It started with a voicemail from an unknown number. Hello, Miss Mitchell. This is Allison Sharp from the Highland Park Foundation. We're organizing a community event for local youth focused on innovation and leadership. We'd love to invite you as our keynote speaker. I had to listen to it twice. Highland Park, my hometown, the place where I'd grown up feeling invisible, where I was told again and again that computers were just toys. Now they were inviting me to speak. I stared out the window for a long time. Emma walked in with coffee. You okay? I handed her my phone to play the message. She grinned. Full circle. The event was 3 weeks away, and I didn't know if I wanted to go. It wasn't stage fright. I'd spoken at tech conferences with thousands of people. It was something deeper, that small voice inside me that whispered, why go back? They never believed in you. They don't deserve your story now. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew the truth. This wasn't about them. It was about me, about claiming my own story, fully, without shame. And it was about the young people who would be in that audience, kids like Maya, like me, who needed to see someone who had walked the same hard path and made it out stronger. I called Allison Sharp back and said yes. The event was held in the very auditorium where I'd once sat quietly during school assemblies, watching other students be honored for achievements I was never allowed to care about. Now the big screen behind me read, Keynote speaker, Olivia Mitchell, founder of Nextech and co-director of SheBuilds. The room was full. Parents, students, local business leaders, even school board members. I stood backstage and took a deep breath. Then I stepped out into the lights. I told them everything. How I used to build websites for fun while my family planned my law school future. How I skipped my own tech competition to attend my brother's celebration. How I built Nextech from a dorm room and sold it for millions. How I started SheBuilds to help girls like me take up space without apology. And then I paused. I looked out at the sea of faces. Some familiar, some curious, some deeply moved. And I said, I used to believe success was something I had to prove to others. But real success is living in alignment with who you are, even when it makes other people uncomfortable. If someone told you your dream is too big, dream anyway. If they said your voice is too quiet, speak anyway. You don't need permission to be powerful, just courage. The room was silent for a moment. Then came a wave of applause, loud, full, and long. After the talk, people came up to thank me. Parents, students, teachers, even some who had once doubted me. One woman said, I wish I'd heard someone like you speak when I was 16. Another said, my daughter is here today. She hasn't stopped talking about SheBuilds since she saw your name on the flyer. But the biggest surprise came just as I was packing up to leave. I turned around, and there stood my mother and father. My dad looked older than I remembered, slower, but his eyes were still sharp. My mother wore her courtroom expression, calm, controlled. Olivia, she said softly. I nodded. Hi. There was a pause. Then my dad spoke. We were wrong. Those words felt unreal. He looked at the floor, then back at me. You built something extraordinary, and you did it on your terms. That takes guts, more than I ever realized. My mom nodded. Her voice wasn't as firm as usual. I always thought I was guiding you toward the best path, she said. I didn't realize I was standing in the way of the one you were meant to take. It wasn't a grand apology, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of them. I felt seen. I didn't need their approval anymore. But hearing those words, it healed something I didn't know was still broken. Later that night, I went home and opened an old box in my closet. Inside were my high school notebooks filled with code sketches, my first trophy from the regional coding competition, printouts of my earliest designs for Nextech. I held them in my hands and smiled. They weren't just old papers. They were proof of the girl who kept going, who stayed up late dreaming and building, even when no one believed in her, who didn't wait to be chosen. She chose herself. Today, SheBuilds has programs in over 30 cities. Nextech continues to grow under its new leadership. And I spend my time mentoring young founders, especially women from backgrounds like mine. Sometimes I still get asked the question, was it worth it? Was it worth being misunderstood? Was it worth feeling alone? Was it worth walking away from the path my parents laid out for me? And my answer is always the same. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes, because the path I took, it led me here, to a life I built from the ground up, to impact that reaches far beyond what I ever imagined, to a legacy of courage, innovation, and truth. If you're still watching this, and you feel like you're in the shadows of someone else's expectations, let me remind you, you are not behind, you are not broken, you are building. And one day they will look at you with wonder, and say, wait, you're the one who built that. And you'll smile, because you always knew,